They were like characters out of a movie, a brilliant creative leader, a crew working in perfect precision. They pulled off hundreds of robberies, stole millions, and baffled law enforcement for years.
They did their homework. They knew what they were targeting.
And they made daring escapes in a custom BMW loaded with gadgets and gizmos.
It was like something out of the Goldfinger movie, where Q had rigged up a car for James Bond.
Like 007 himself, the gang seemed to have it all. Brains, bravery, bravado. It seemed no one could stop the James Bond gang. Most New Yorkers moved to the suburbs to get away from crime. But in the early 1990s, the city's wealthiest bedroom communities were under attack. Deadbolts and burglar alarms couldn't stop this clever gang of thieves from plundering millions in cash and jewels. They'd pulled off hundreds of jobs with no end in sight. In Bergen County, New Jersey, everyone knew about the rash of burglaries. Mary Ann Heaver just never thought it would happen to her. She came home one afternoon to find police responding to her burglar alarm.
I saw these police officers all around my house with guns drawn, and my front door was open.
If the burglars were still in the house, all hell could break loose at any second.
I didn't know what to expect. I was very frightened. It was such a shock.
Had she come home any earlier, Mary Ann may have come face to face with the intruders.
The sergeant said to me, you would have walked in on it, and the consequences could have been very different.
But the crooks had already fled. Desperate for a lead, police brought in the canine unit.
The dog ran to this big fir tree in front of my house and was barking up at the tree. So it was very obvious to me anyway that whoever was doing this probably hid in the shade of the tree, watched my house.
Mary Ann's sense of violation grew as she walked through her home with police.
We went through the whole house. The first thing I noticed were everything was pulled out, drawers, and including a drawer that had my jewelry in it.
Everything had been cleaned out. $4,000 of jewelry, gold rings, silver bracelets, and a pearl necklace, all gone. And they hadn't left a single clue. The burglaries were so widespread, investigators had a hard time believing a single gang could be responsible.
They were operating, one day in Bergen County, the next day in Morris County, then going down to Monmouth County, and then going to New York and then Connecticut.
There are a lot of different burglaries that occur. So if you were a detective and you were looking at a bunch of them, you may not see a pattern. You may just see a whole string of burglaries.
But then a police patrol car spots a BMW speeding away from where a burglary had just taken place. The cops gave chase, but got more than they bargained for.
All of a sudden, the back license plate flipped down, and a cluster of halogen lights popped out and blinded the police, and then the car took off.
Police were left in the dust. With their mysterious getaway car and stylish MO, the thieves became known to the police and media as the James Bond gang.
And that was the first time it began to connect that I think I was robbed by the James Bond gang.
Fear and fascination swirled around this unstoppable gang until cops could get a lead on these elusive burglars and the mastermind at their helm. The James Bond gang couldn't be shaken or stirred. A A well-organized gang of burglars was plundering New York City's wealthiest suburbs, stealing millions in cash and jewels. The police and FBI seemed powerless to stop them.
We knew that they were good because most of the detectives were good detectives, and they pretty much knew who was committing the burglaries, but they just weren't able to apprehend them.
Their high-tech getaway car always kept them one step ahead of the law. Sophisticated and clever, the gang had an air of international mystery. But these criminals were homegrown. Terrence Lawton was the ringleader. His associates were Bruce Anderson, known as Cap, David Kirkland, better known as Keith, and Walter Smith, aka Demo. They'd all grown up together.
These were basically a bunch of kids that got together in high school and were schooled by other burglars, and they found out they could make a lot of money and a living this way.
By the time they left school, they were already a disciplined gang of thieves.
These guys were smart enough. Most of them did not take drugs. They didn't trust their own friends if they took drugs.
Lawton, the leader, had a legitimate business customizing cars. But planning crimes was his passion.
He was very good at what he did. He thought about it. He was very calculative. He was a professional in his own way.
It was Lawton who designed and built the James Bond car.
Terrence Lawton had a detailing shop, and in his shop, he was able to do a lot of things. You can take a car and restore it. You can do a lot of work with it to make it look shiny and new. You can also rig it with a lot of different devices and gizmos, and that's exactly what they did.
Lawton transformed a BMW 740 into the perfect getaway car.
It was like something out of the Goldfinger movie, where Q had rigged up a car for James Bond in order to help him get away from people who were coming after him. There were buttons on the console. You would press one button and a drawer, a secret compartment, would slide out from underneath the dashboard. And they'd be able to throw the cash and the jewelry in, press the button again, and the drawer would then go back underneath the dashboard.
If police ever pulled the gang over, the loot would be safely hidden away. But they didn't intend to get caught in the first place.
The license plate would be electronically operated, and there'd be 4 bright halogen light bulbs that would go on. And that would be to blind law enforcement when they were chasing them, so they couldn't get close enough to get the license plate number.
It was a very sophisticated idea. The one thing that made them different was the car. It made perfect sense in terms of what they were doing.
They were just as clever when it came to planning their burglaries.
They realized that early on that the places to hit were the ritzy neighborhoods, the exclusive neighborhoods. And that's what they concentrated on.
Neighborhoods where BMWs were a dime a dozen and wouldn't look out of place.
They were able to case some of these neighborhoods without raising any kind of suspicion. Just cruising up and down streets, designating certain houses, finding certain places that they wanted to hit.
They did their homework. They knew the areas they were going into. They knew what they were targeting. They would look at the landscape and to see that people spend a lot of money on the landscaping.
To the James Bond gang, burglary was a craft they wanted to perfect.
They got better each time. They learned about reinforced doors, but they always knew how to attack and knew how to beat the system. They didn't know when to stop. They were addicted to it. They would almost get elated, almost like a high, when they were talking about the burglaries because they enjoyed it so much of what they were doing.
In December 1992, the gang targeted Mary Ann Heaver's house in Bergen County, New Jersey.
They knew exactly what they were looking for. They knew exactly the type of homes they were looking for. And it would seem to me that they knew exactly the type and methodology of the alarm systems.
Once they'd picked their target, they moved in with military precision. First, an advance man hid by a tree and scouted out the house. When he was sure the house was empty, he called in the others. Lawton was the driver. He'd wait in the car while the rest of the gang went in.
They always went through the front door. They would actually ring the bell before they went in and make sure no one was home.
The heaver's alarm was on, but the gang was unfazed.
Sometimes they would rip out the alarms. By the time the alarm company calls the police, they're already in the car and gone.
They knew that they had a time limit to get in and get out.
One of the members of the gang looks out for homeowners returning or for the police. One other member of the gang will go up and immediately begin to ransack the bedrooms in search of jewelry, cash, a safe.
Those people hide things in their bedrooms. They feel safe, but that's the place they would target.
Outside, Lawton monitored police radios, ready to alert the gang if cops were on their way. The gang always knew the quickest, safest way out.
Once they recover what they're looking for, they will immediately open the back door or rear sliding glass door so that they have an easy exit route.
They then made their way to where Lawton was waiting to pick them up.
They're very surgical, they're very precise, and they're usually in and out of a house inside of minutes.
By the time the police responded to the alarm, the gang and the loot would be long gone.
They always called a burglary a payday. And they knew that when they ran out of money, they could just go out, do another burglary that day, that afternoon.
If they were chased, Terrence Lawton had several tricks up his sleeve. If the blinding lights didn't stop pursuers in their tracks, there was Plan B. At the press of a button, oil would spew out the back of the car. No one could catch them if they were sliding all over the road. The gang had perfected the art of burglary. Like James Bond himself, they seemed unstoppable. But even 007 had his weaknesses. And sooner or later, police knew the notorious gang was bound to make a mistake.